A man who changed the course of human history was buried like a common criminal. No ceremony, no funeral, not even a word of farewell. Why would the most public death lead to such a hurried burial in the dark of night? And that overlooked detail might just change the way you see the entire story of Easter. Jerusalem, the year 33 AD. This ancient city is heavy with tension. The air is thick, filled with whispers, suspicious glances, and the hurried footsteps of Roman soldiers patrolling every narrow street. The Jewish people are preparing for the Sabbath, the holiest day of the week. But this time, something feels different. An event has just shaken the city, and it seems as if everyone is holding their breath. A man, not a king, not a general, not even a high priest, has just been crucified. His name was Jesus of Nazareth. He did not die in war. He did not die from disease. He died condemned as a rebel, a man who claimed to be the Son of God, a threat to both the religious authorities and the Roman Empire. The execution was public, between two criminals, before the eyes of hundreds, and then he breathed his last around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. But the strange part was not the death itself. It was what happened next. Normally, the bodies of the crucified were left hanging on the cross, a warning to all, or they were thrown into a criminal's grave, without ritual, without a name. But with Jesus, things unfolded differently. Only hours after his death, a man named Joseph of Arimathea, a member of the Sanhedrin, stepped forward. The Sanhedrin was the highest religious council of the Jews at that time, like a supreme court for matters of faith. Joseph went to the Roman governor, Pontius Pilate, and asked for permission to take Jesus' body. A risky move, an unusual decision, and a turning point that raises questions no one has ever fully answered. Joseph was not a public disciple of Jesus. He was a man of status, of influence, with much to lose. So why would he risk everything to bury a man executed as a criminal? Was it simply the Sabbath law that forced him to act quickly? Or was there something deeper, a personal reason, a hidden faith? And why was it done in such haste, in secrecy, with no ceremony, no funeral? Have you ever noticed the hurried burial of Jesus? If you thought you already knew this story, get ready to see it in a whole new light. Joseph of Arimathea was no ordinary man. He was a member of the Sanhedrin, the most powerful religious council of the Jewish people at that time. The Sanhedrin was like a supreme court of faith, the place where the most important decisions about law and belief were made. Joseph was a man of position, of influence, with much to lose, if anyone suspected him of supporting Jesus. And yet, he was the only one who went to the Roman governor and asked for Jesus' body. Not the disciples, not the family, not the followers who had walked with Jesus through every step of his ministry. Why Joseph? Was it out of a sense of moral duty? Or was he hiding a personal faith, a secret loyalty to Jesus? And why did he act so quickly, so quietly, almost in secret? According to Jewish law, the dead had to be buried before sundown on the Sabbath. Jesus died around 3 in the afternoon. That left only a few short hours to complete everything. But a proper Jewish burial was not simple. The body had to be washed, anointed with spices, wrapped in linen, prayers recited, and then placed in the family tomb. No one could possibly do all this in just a few hours, especially when the man had just been executed as a criminal. So what did Joseph do? He took the body of Jesus, wrapped it quickly in linen, laid it in a new tomb that had never been used, and then walked away in silence. But that tomb, it was not a criminal's grave. It was a family tomb carved into solid rock, the kind of resting place reserved for the wealthy, the honored, the respected. Tradition did not allow the executed to be buried in such tombs. They were considered defiled. Their bodies were usually discarded in public pits or buried in cursed ground. So why did Joseph break the rule? Was he hiding something? Or was he carrying out a plan we've never been told? If the burial was only temporary, then the empty tomb could not stand as absolute proof of the resurrection. Instead, it became a gap, a void, both in history and in faith. And that gap has stirred questions for more than 2,000 years. Questions no one has been able to fully answer. Now imagine yourself in the place of Mary Magdalene, the woman who witnessed it all. The next part of the story will not only be history, it will be raw emotion. Sunday morning, 3 days after Jesus was crucified, Mary Magdalene, along with several other women, returned to the tomb, the very place where they had seen Joseph lay the body of Jesus on Friday. They carried spices and linens, everything needed for a proper burial ritual. Because that day had been so rushed, they had not been able to do anything. They came back to finish what had been left undone. But when they arrived, the tomb was empty. The great stone had been rolled aside. No body, no Joseph, no guards. Only an angel, or a man dressed in white, who said, "He is not here, he has risen." What do you think? An empty tomb, is it proof of a miracle? Or the trace of a hidden plan? Perhaps this is the moment to pause and reflect. You are not alone in your doubts. Come with me into the next part, where the questions become harder to ignore than ever before. According to the Gospels, Mary ran to tell the disciples. But their first reaction was not belief, it was doubt. For centuries, scholars have debated this event. Some believe the empty tomb is undeniable evidence of the resurrection, a miracle beyond all natural law. But others suggest controversial theories, the stolen body theory, the wrong tomb theory, even political motives. If the body had been moved, then the disappearance was not a miracle. It was an intentional act, perhaps to protect, to conceal, or to create a symbol. And if that were true, then the entire story of the resurrection, the very foundation of the Christian faith, would need to be seen through another lens. Not to deny it, but to seek a deeper understanding. What did the witnesses feel in that moment? Confusion, grief, hope, and fear. They did not know if they were standing in the presence of a miracle or in the shadow of a scheme. They did not know if they should believe or question. And that very uncertainty has kept the story alive for more than 2,000 years. There is one small detail that many overlook. In the Gospel of John, when Peter and another disciple ran to the tomb, they found the burial cloths neatly folded, not like a theft, not like something done in haste, but as if someone had left with intention. But if Jesus truly rose from the dead, why did he not appear right there at the tomb? Why leave behind a silence, a question, instead of a clear answer? Could it be that this very uncertainty was meant to test faith? Or was it meant to hide another truth? After the empty tomb was discovered, the news spread quickly. But not everyone believed. In fact, most of Jesus' disciples were confused, afraid, and filled with doubt. They had lost their teacher. They had watched the brutal death on the cross. They had seen the body carried away in the shadows. And now, there was nothing. No body, no explanation. Only an empty space, both in flesh and in faith. That emptiness, was it a loss or an invitation to believe? According to the Gospels, Thomas, one of the 12 disciples, said, "Unless I see the nail marks in his hands, unless I put my finger where the nails were and place my hand into his side, I will not believe." Thomas was not a man without faith. He was a realist, like so many of us. His words captured the struggle between reason and faith that every heart has faced. It was not just his doubt. It became the voice of millions who came after, those standing on the edge between logic and belief. But then, one by one, the stories began. Strange encounters, moments when Jesus appeared, not at the tomb, but in the most unexpected places. On the road to Emmaus, inside a locked room, by the shore of Galilee. Not as a ghost, but as a man eating, speaking, touchable, alive. These appearances were more than evidence. They were answers to confusion. And from there, a new journey began. Not by sight, but by faith. And those encounters changed everything. From doubt, they moved to belief. From fear, they found courage. From hiding in the shadows, they became the ones who proclaimed the message. But the question still remains. If Jesus truly rose from the dead, why did he not appear at the tomb? Why leave behind an emptiness, a question, instead of certainty? Perhaps the very uncertainty was the test of faith. Perhaps the hurried burial was part of a larger design, a plan not only to conceal, but to awaken, not only to protect, but to ignite a faith beyond all limits. And from that moment, a new faith was born. Not built on physical evidence, but on personal encounter, not on absolute certainty, but on the choice to believe or not to believe. If you were Thomas, would you demand proof, or would you choose to trust, reason, or faith? What would you choose? The empty tomb became a symbol, not because it was empty, but because it opened a space for faith. Joseph of Arimathea disappears from the story after that. No one knows what he did next. No one knows if he ever moved the body. No one knows if he was the beginning of a greater plan, or simply a man who did the right thing in the final moment. But his silence only deepened the mystery, and that empty tomb began to carry a meaning that would echo through time. The empty tomb was never just a place. It became a symbol of physical emptiness that turned into the foundation of a spiritual belief. From the first century, the disciples of Jesus began to proclaim, "He has risen from the dead," not because they saw him walk out of the tomb, but because they believed that the absence of his body was proof of the presence of the divine, not by sight, but by faith, a faith born from what was missing. In the earliest centuries, the first Christian communities had no churches, no crosses, no elaborate rituals. What they had was a story about an empty tomb, and they had a conviction that death was not the end. That tomb became a symbol of victory, not of man, but of God, not of reason, but of faith. Yet the ambiguity remained, and it was that very ambiguity that kept the symbol alive. There are no independent historical records confirming the empty tomb. No absolute archaeological evidence, only a testimony, passed from one person to another, from one generation to the next. These testimonies were not historical documents in the modern sense. They were collective memory, preserved through tradition, through worship, through faith. In the Middle Ages, the empty tomb was reimagined in art, in literature, in architecture. Churches were built with symbolic crypts. Paintings showed angels rolling away the stone. Sermons echoed the words, "He is not here," and yet no one truly knew where here was. No one knew the exact location of the real tomb. No one knew if it was ever truly empty or if it ever existed at all. And that very uncertainty is what turned the tomb into a timeless symbol. A symbol that does not need coordinates, only belief. Modern theologians divide into two camps. Some say the empty tomb is historical evidence. Others see it as metaphor, as symbol. But both agree on one thing: the empty tomb cannot be ignored. It is the starting point of every conversation about life, about death, and about what lies beyond human understanding. Which way do you lean? The empty tomb, is it a historical event or a spiritual metaphor, evidence or symbol? What would you choose? For those who believe, the tomb was not only the place where a body once lay, it was the place where despair was buried and where hope was born. Today, millions of pilgrims travel to Jerusalem to visit the empty tomb, believed to be inside the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. They stand before an absence. They pray, they weep. They believe. No one asks, "Is it real?" They only ask, "Do I believe?" And yet the question lingers, circling like an unfinished loop. If the burial was rushed, if the body was moved, if the tomb was not the final resting place, does the symbol still hold its power? The answer does not lie in archaeology. It does not lie in history. It lies in the heart of every person. The empty tomb, a hollow space cut into cold stone. No body, no explanation, only absence and millions of hearts trying to fill it with faith. Maybe you followed this story from the beginning, out of curiosity. Maybe you've asked the questions. Why was the burial so rushed? Why did Joseph act the way he did? Why was there no ritual, no funeral, no final goodbye? And now you stand before a truth we don't know for sure. No one does. There is no absolute proof, only fragments, history, emotion, faith, woven together into a living story. And it is that very uncertainty that makes the story powerful. If everything were clear, perhaps it would only be history. But because it is ambiguous, it has become a symbol. A symbol not only of resurrection, but of choice. You can choose to believe Jesus rose from the dead, or to believe his body was moved, or to believe the empty tomb is a metaphor for rebirth, in the soul, in the community, in hope itself. Whatever you choose, you are standing before an empty space. Will you fill it with doubt or with hope? Millions have chosen hope. They do not need proof. They do not need a body. They only need a story of a man who died and then was no longer in the tomb. They believe death is not the end, absence is not loss, and silence can be the loudest voice of all. And in that silence, the act of Joseph of Arimathea echoes even louder. Joseph left no explanation, no letters, no journal, only an act, hurried, risky, and deeply meaningful. Perhaps he knew something we do not, or perhaps he simply did the right thing in a fleeting moment. Either way, he opened a new chapter in human history, not with words, but with a tomb and the emptiness inside it. Have you ever stood before such emptiness? A moment with no answers, only a choice. Hold that thought. If you've ever lived through a moment like this, share it below. I read every comment, and in the final part, I'll take you to the place where faith and truth meet. We've walked a journey together, from the death of Jesus to a hurried burial, from a cold stone tomb to an empty space filled with questions, from doubt to faith, from history to symbol. And now, you stand at a crossroads. Maybe you believe Jesus rose from the dead, a miracle beyond every law of nature. Maybe you believe his body was moved, a secret act carried out in the shadows. Or maybe you believe the empty tomb is a metaphor for rebirth in the soul, in the community, in hope itself. Whatever you believe, you are facing a question no one else can answer for you. What will you choose to place inside that empty space? It is not proof that makes people believe. It is the lack of proof that forces a choice. And that choice is where faith begins. Maybe you'll say, it's only an ancient story. Or maybe you'll say, it's what changed my life forever. Both can be true, because the truth is not found in the tomb itself. It is found in how you see the emptiness within it. If this story has made you rethink what you once believed, share it. Ask the questions. Have the conversations, not to argue, but to understand. What do you believe? Was the empty tomb a miracle or a hidden plan? Share your thoughts below. I read every comment,